This is the U-Show podcast. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in to the U-Show podcast. As always, I'm Chris Treft with Ben Gisselson. We got a special one lined up for you today. Our guest is Jared Boll. If you don't know who he is, you haven't watched much NHL hockey because he's not going to score your highlight reel goal, but he was known every time he touched the ice in some sort of way, whether it was energy, whether it was fighting, making a big hit, scoring that timely goal, being a leader. He was a great NHL player for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and now he stepped into a different role with the Blue Jackets. But he's our guest today, Ben.
A fan favorite. That's what comes to mind when I think about Jared Boll. He was certainly and still is a fan favorite with the Stars fans down in Lincoln at the Icebox, which is, I know I'm biased talking about Buccaneer Arena, but I think that the Icebox might be, I'll give it the second toughest place to play in the USHL. I'm going to throw the Bucs a bone and say that we got one of the toughest buildings, if not the toughest building to play in. But the Icebox is awesome. They got that great light show down there. Their fans are rabid. They get in your face. It's a great building to take part in a hockey game in. And he was one of the big reasons why fans stood on their feet and cheered when he was there, not only because he, like you mentioned, Chris, played with such energy and such physicality and toughness, but he could also put the puck in the back of the net when he was in Lincoln too. He had some great point numbers when he was there playing for the Stars, and continued to be somewhat of a contributor, not only in the physical department, but offensively when he moved his way up through juniors, and then, of course, into the NHL, where he was a long time, again, fan favorite with the Columbus Blue Jackets.
You're just a homer, man. It's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they signed my paycheck, right? So, I mean, I got to be a bit of a homer for him, don't I?
That's just how it works. People don't understand. All game 50-50. It's like, well, Buccaneer fans are pretty much the only ones listening. So I don't know what with you. I'm not gonna trash my guy who just made a turnover. So no, I get it. I just had to give you some slack, but we don't have much for you. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. Jared Boll. Please welcome into the U-Show podcast the current development coach for the Columbus Blue Jackets, the former Lincoln Star way back when in the USHL, and a longtime NHLer with the Columbus Blue Jackets and a couple other teams. Jared Boll, how are we doing today, sir?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing very well. Just trying to get through these trying times like everybody else. And we know that a lot of guys are in different situations. For you, being a development coach with the season on hold, what have you been up to? Have you still been working at all during these trying times? And, you know, what have been your guilty pleasures so far during this break?
I think, like everyone, just kind of taking up time by watching shows, a lot of Netflix. Obviously, we get to be home a lot more now because during the season you're gone a lot and you spend a lot of hours at the rink. So it's nice to be home. I got a young daughter. So it's good to be around the family a lot. Trying to take the best out of all this situation. I actually get some stuff done around the house for once. So it's good. It's obviously we want to be at the rink. We want to be playing hockey, but there's more important things right now, and staying safe is the biggest thing. So just trying to wait till the season gets going again.
So with the Netflix, what's been a show that you binged that you really liked, and what was one that you didn't like so much that you're like, why did I just watch a whole season of that?
I usually don't last the whole season. If I don't like the first episode or two, I don't grind it out. I kind of switch. So Ozarks was a really cool one. I got through that pretty fast. I would say that's the best one I've seen. I caught up on Suits too. That's a good one. So
that is a good one.
So right before we got on, you told us that you just got back from having some fun outside. What have you been up to out there?
Yeah, it's turkey hunting season here in Ohio. So I've been spending my mornings doing that. I'm starting to think that there's no turkeys out there. It's been a tough go, but it's fun to be outside, even if you don't see anything. It's just great to be outside when the weather's nice. It's been raining a lot here, so trying to get some fresh air, spend time outdoors, and it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
The turkeys must have got the memo about social distancing as well, which is no good for you.
Yeah, or else they just can't call them in. They know it's They know it's a fake turkey trying to call them in. I got to work on that. I got time on my hands so I can work on my turkey call when I'm at home.
Well, we would normally ask you to do an impression of it here, but we'll just move on to the next.
I got the baby sleeping upstairs, so or else I would do it.
Well, Jared, let's start at the beginning for you. A guy that you had experience not only in the Chicago area growing up there, playing hockey there, but you were a guy that, at least by the research I could find, were having some thoughts about, okay, where's the next step for my career? Is it the USHL? Is it major, junior? You wound up spending a decent amount of time in both leagues, but the Lincoln Stars was the eventual first decision for you to head to the USHL. What was that process like for you as a 15, 16-year-old making that decision, and why did Lincoln end up being the place that you began your journey in junior?
Growing up in Illinois and in the U.S., the college route was always the first my first plan of what I wanted out of hockey was to get a free education, get a scholarship, and move on from there. And as I got older and Lincoln drafted me, I actually broke my leg my draft year, so I couldn't even go to the training camp. But they saw enough of me during the season where they felt comfortable just having me on the team and kind of let me work myself into the lineup, which was awesome. And what a place to be drafted to. I haven't seen a game there in a while, but when I was there, it was sold out every night. The fans were awesome. It was such a great barn to play in the fairgrounds there. And I still remember the light show. It was probably the best one I've been a part of. So really, really good memories from Lincoln. I had great coaching with Steve Johnson. I had him for 2 years. So he kind of changed a lot of the way I saw the game. And he was the first coach that, kind of really thought I had a future in hockey and kind of pushed me to that. And just the way that I played the game. And at the time, I just felt major junior was more my style, the way that I approached the game and my strong suits in the game. I felt like major junior was the way to go. And looking back, it ended up being the right decision. I don't think there's a right way or wrong way to go, just whatever you feel most comfortable with. And Plymouth wasn't that far from Chicago growing up. So I was familiar with the area a little bit. I knew the head coach and I had some buddies playing there. So it was an easy adjustment for me going from the USHL to the OHL. But the USHL is definitely where I got my feet wet in junior hockey, and I learned a lot my 2 years there.
Looking at your numbers, obviously the thing that stands out is the penalty minute side of it, 470 PIMs in 2 seasons with the Stars. Now, there were also a good amount of points to go with that. Specifically, your second year, you were second on the team in scoring. So it wasn't just I'm going to run up and run around and fight. You got some work done on the front end of the ice as well. But I want to talk about the rougher side of the game here, which is clearly where you established your role, not only in the USHL, the OHL, but in the NHL later for 11 seasons. When did you learn that could be an element of your game? Was it early? Was it in Lincoln? Was it after? Kind of where did that begin for Jared Boll?
It was in Lincoln. I never was in a fight until, my first year in junior. Was the first hockey fight I've ever been in. And it wasn't all wins. You kind of learn the hard way, and that's the way I did it. But, I just felt like I was in a position where some guys couldn't stick up for themselves. And I fared pretty good doing it. And I loved being the guy to stick up for the guys that couldn't do it. And I just loved that style of play. I remember my dad's from Detroit, so I grew up a huge Red Wings fan. And I loved Yzerman and Fedorov and those guys. But the guys I really loved watching was, the Martin LaPointes, Darren McCarty's, Brendan Shanahan's. And those are the guys that I kind of molded my game after, and just a guy that could do everything, and it was a lot more. There's a lot more of it in the game back then than there is now. It's kind of, it still has a place, but it's definitely what it was back then, what it is now. So it was just another element to my game that kind of rounded it out. And I try to do everything, physical, fight, score, be a leader, and I kind of learned all that starting in the USHL.
How was that first fight? Do you remember it at all? Because you said you'd never been in a hockey fight before, so that was probably uncharted territory for you.
Yeah, I actually do. It was in preseason. And my rookie year, I had to wear a cage because I wasn't 18. So, it was so different. You square off and I had a cage on, so I had to undo my cage and take my helmet off. It's kind of funny looking back on it. But, yeah, I did pretty good. I didn't lose that bad, so I kept doing it and stuck with it and learned along the way of how to protect yourself. Yeah, that was the start to a few fights along the way.
Who are some of the toughest customers you remember from the USHL during your 2 seasons?
I remember Dennis McCauley was tough. He was a Sioux City guy. We played them a lot, so we always seemed to go at it. There was a guy, I think either Waterloo or Des Moines, Dustin Molly was a big boy. I remember him fighting a lot. I'm trying to think. I'd have to look up some fights, but there was usually a guy on each team that that could hold their own and was pretty tough.
The style of hockey that you played was really bred for that Lincoln fan base, and in some aspects, the USHL fan base at that time. I think it was a big reason in the 2000s why a lot of those buildings were bulging with people, is because of the physical nature of the game during that time. It was physical, it was nasty, but not only that, but like we talked about, you put the puck in the net too. You were a fan favorite while you were there. You're still somebody that your name hangs in the rafters at the Icebox in Lincoln. What was it like for you at such a young age becoming such a fan favorite amongst the Lincoln Star fans?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like I said earlier, growing up, those are the players that I watched. And, no one, you've heard a million people say it, but no one's sitting down when there's a fight. Everyone's on their feet cheering. So I just kind of took that all the way my whole career. And I loved playing in the front of those crowds and those old barns in the USHL. I'm not sure how many are around anymore, but man, the fans were awesome. They were throwing beer on you by the second period. It was just crazy. And it was such a fun atmosphere. The Icebox. It was just such a really, really fun place to play. And for me coming out of AAA, I had no idea that junior hockey was like that, especially out in Nebraska. And it was an eye opener, and it was a lot of fun. And we had some good teams too. So Lincoln was always good. They won a championship early on, so the fans really jumped on board right away, and they were awesome.
There are plenty of fighters in hockey at every level, and not every one of them gets to go on to play in the NHL. So you clearly could do more than just drop the gloves. What were some of the other parts of your game that you were proud of when you played that you said, I've established I can do this, and I've continued to do this all the way up to the end of your career?
Yeah, I mean, you can't just fight. You got to be able to kind of play the game. A big thing for me, especially coming to the OHL, I had a coach there, Mike Bellucci, that he always started our line, and our thing was we'd get in on the forecheck and you just make it miserable for the D going back to get the puck. And it might not happen in the first second, but if you're constantly getting hammered every single time you're going back to get the puck, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to slow up, and that's what causes turnovers. So a huge part of my game was a forecheck and being physical and getting to the net. And that's kind of where I scored most of my goals, is just banging around the net or off a shin pad or something greasy around the net. And yeah, that's how I played my whole career, whether it was USHL, OHL, or when I was in the NHL.
So now you finally make it to the NHL after a couple of seasons in the OHL. What was your first moment in the NHL where you said, man, I made it? Or you look around and you're just like, this is what I dreamed of when I was growing up?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. My rookie year, we had some cool names on that team. Like I said earlier, growing up a huge Red Wings fan. My first year I played, Adam Foote was our captain, so I hated him being in the Colorado Avalanche. So I couldn't stand him, so I was all nervous to see him in the room. And then sitting across the room with Sergei Fedorov, who I looked at and I thought he wasn't even human. It was just really cool experience for me. And from day one, they were so good with we had an older team, so we only had two rookies at the time, but they were so good with us, just kind of trying to make it easy on us. It's a huge adjustment coming from junior to the NHL. You know, you don't really have anyone babysitting. You're on your own. So having those guys look after me was really cool. And yeah, just sitting in the room with, you know, we had Michael Pekka, like I said, Adam Foote, Sergei Fedorov, guys that Freddie Modine, guys that won Stanley Cups and been around a long time. It was pretty cool to be able to learn from those guys.
I was going to say 9 seasons in Columbus before you ended up making your way to Anaheim towards the end of your career. You were a part of getting that organization off the ground. You were there in some infantile stages of the organization. What does that city mean to you, not only while you were a player, but now as a coach there? And can you speak to what kind of a hockey town it's become in a relatively quick fashion?
Yeah, I mean, the fans were always awesome when I played here. You know, we had a few good seasons and a few seasons, you know, that we were kind of down towards the bottom. But the fans were always awesome. Columbus is a great sports town, you know, kind of like actually like Lincoln. The Buckeyes here are huge and they're used to winning. So you know, the fan base here has been awesome. They stuck with the team through some pretty tough times, some rebuilding times, and I would say since Torts got here, you know, they've had a bunch of first round picks, and they really kind of changed the whole dynamic of the organization and the way they run stuff. And it's pretty cool to see the transformation of where it was when I was playing here to where it is now coaching. But yeah, I've told a lot of people this, that first round sweep of Tampa, that game 4 in Columbus, was one of the loudest buildings I've been in, and man, that was just the first round too. So it just kind of gets everyone excited. Just the more you win and the farther you go in the playoffs, just the more it ramps up. And it was a great you know, first series win for the organization, but now we're looking to build on from there and make some deeper runs.
Looking at your career compared to some other guys that play your style, it seems like a lot of the time those guys go to the American League first and kind of hone their skills before they make it to the NHL. For you, you went straight to the NHL. You made the team that first year, and you never looked back. And you ended up playing in the American League, you know, your final season. But why do you think that you had so much success early in the National Hockey League, being able to adjust and being able to protect guys like Sergei Fedorov and players like that?
Man, when I was young, I was 2021. I thought I would be able to do it forever, and I really wasn't scared of much back then. And I didn't feel much pain for the first few years. So it was fun. It was crazy. I remember my first training camp. I was running around. I was scoring some goals. And I just had a scout with Columbus that I still talk to. I just remember him telling me, just do something to stand out, because there's a lot of guys at training camp. Do something to separate yourself from everyone else. And that's what I did. And I mean, training camp's a little bit different now, but I remember there was 3 fights a game in these Traverse City things, and it was just crazy. And that's what I did. I stood out and I made a difference every single game, and it caught people's eyes. And after training camp, Ken Hitchcock was my first coach, and he pulled me in his office and he said, you know, you made the team, but can you do this for 82 nights a year, and you got to be able to do this every night? And I said, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to be able to stay in the NHL, and that's what I did. And yeah, I kind of never looked back, and I got into a role where I made a home in Columbus for a while doing it, and man, it was a lot of fun.
Now transitioning into your post-hockey career, you're the development coach for the Columbus Blue Jackets. How do you make that transition when you were a guy that was a rough and tumbled character? You're running around, making big hits, standing up for your teammates, and now you're trying to develop these players, and most of them probably have a much different style from the way you played, and your style is kind of dwindling a little bit in this new age game. So how have you transitioned to become a successful development coach post-hockey?
It's been awesome. I knew, I went and played in Anaheim for 2 years, but in the back of my head, I knew I always wanted to come back to Columbus, hopefully rejoin the organization. I was here for a while, and I love the city, and, I met my wife here, and my family lives here. So it was a great opportunity to come back. my whole career, I was third, fourth line guy. So all I did was stay on the ice, do extra, and just be the hardest worker every day in order to stay in the lineup and stay in the league. And that's kind of what I bring now to the development side. And I've gotten into a pretty good role here in Columbus, where they've given me some more responsibility, working a lot with the guys that are in the lineup and the younger guys and the guys doing extra after practice, because it goes a long way. It's a long season. And if you do that stuff every single day, it pays off. And it's not always easy in December and February when, it's kind of the dog days of the season, and you got to still be out there doing extra. And it's my job to be there to push the guys and help them out and kind of, be someone to talk to that's gone through it. So it's been a really fun role for me, and it kept me in the game. And it's been awesome for these 2 years out of playing.
Two final questions from me, Jared. You mentioned earlier, as we all know, being in the hockey world, that fighting has definitely slowly made its way to much more of a secondary, tertiary part of hockey than it used to be. Plenty of discussions to be had about whether people like that or whether they don't. We obviously know all the medical repercussions of what comes with long-term fighting careers. But like you mentioned, there's also an element of policing the game that enforcers do that hockey, a lot of people, especially the Puritans of hockey, feel the game always needs. I'm not asking you to stake a flag in the sand here and make your proclamation about it, but where do you stand on all of this in terms of where the game is trending with fighting and how it currently impacts the game at every level and where it should be in terms of your perspective?
I mean, obviously I'm biased towards it a little bit. I think that it definitely has a spot in the game. The stage fights off the face-offs where it really doesn't have anything to do with the game. I was in a lot of them. So, I don't really see those have a place in the game anymore. I see the younger guys coming up don't really have it growing up. So they're like, what are these two idiots doing fighting each other? It really has no impact on the game. But, the fights where it's, there's a huge hit in the corner, you're sticking up for your teammate, or, the game's just not going your way, and there's some pushing and shoving in the corner, and it's a fight. It gets the boys going. It gets the the fans on their feet. It gets the building going. I think that those kind of fights definitely have a place in the game, and I still talk to a lot of the players, and they love it. The skill guys love seeing the guys come in there and stick up for them and give them some room on the ice. Because you have rats running around the ice, and it's not really a big deal if they got to sit in the box for 2 minutes, or they hit someone in the head and they get kicked out. Some of them would probably rather get kicked out so they don't have to stick up for themselves and pay the price. So definitely that those kind of fights I still feel have a really big place in the game. The stage fights off the face-offs to kind of I don't really see those having that much of an impact anymore, the way they used to.
Lastly, for me, for a young player that is coming into their junior age, that knows they've got some talent, but also knows that they maybe want to play that role. They want to be an enforcer. They want to make their way through junior. Maybe it is through college. Maybe it's through major junior, however they get there, but they want to get to the NHL and become an enforcer in that role. What would you tell the current young enforcers of the world about trying to make it to where you've made it to?
I think a huge part of it now, you got to be able to play. You can't just go out and fight, because a lot of teams are rolling, or pretty much every team rolls 4 lines. They don't really have a guy that's sitting on the bench only playing 3-4 minutes a night anymore. So if you have that in your game and you're tough and you're a tough kid and you like to play physical, I'd say the biggest thing is just make sure you're in shape. You're the best conditioned player on the team, and you're always first on the ice, last to leave. That goes a long way with the coaching staff. And when they see a guy willing to drop their gloves and stick up for themselves and stick up for teammates, and on top of that, they're pushing everyone in practice or pushing everyone in the gym. They're, like I said, they're the best conditioned athlete on the team. You can have a long, good career out of being that guy, and every organization loves to have those guys a part of it. So I would say don't just worry about the fighting, but worry about everything else too. And if you have all of it, then you're going to have a long, good career.
Last question here for you. So the USHL has obviously evolved a little bit since you left, not like it was decades ago, but still, it's a league that is constantly growing. You'll see more and more draft picks coming out of the USHL. You see more players going to the NHL or even straight to pro hockey in some cases. Why do you think the USHL has grown so much since you played in the league?
I think there's the talent in USA hockey has gotten so much better. You see NHL drafts now with all these first round picks. I don't know the exact numbers, but you just see the numbers of American kids getting drafted higher up in the draft, and the minor hockey now in the U.S. and their states. Even the minor hockey in Ohio is growing. You see Florida teams. You see all these California teams. These Arizona kids. I feel like just the hockey in general has grown so much in the U.S. and USA hockey that the talent and you got those young kids now that want to play hockey. All those really talented athletes, they're not going to play other sports. They're playing hockey, and I think that just makes the whole minor hockey league system better, and then it feeds into the junior hockey league in the U.S. too, and I think that's has a big thing to do with USHL.
Well, Jared, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll let you get back to practicing your turkey call and hope you have a little more luck.
I need a lot of practice.
Hopefully you have a little more luck with the birds going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks again to the one and only Jared Boll for our interview. Another great one, Ben. I mean, he's a guy it's always great to talk to, and it's great to hear his story. I mean, he's a fan favorite for a reason, so that was a fun one.
Yeah, indeed. A very good chat with Jared. A big thank you to him for taking time with us here today. Also to Glenn Odabrowski of the Columbus Blue Jackets for helping set that up. Couldn't have been happier with how it went, and always enjoy talking to guys that played the way he played in that enforcer style, because 9 times out of 10, they're just fantastic guys, and that's the case with Jared Boll.
So coming up later in the week, we did a line change here. We had one person who we won't give it away, but we switched things up. It's going to be Reed Cashman. I don't even know what to call him. Current assistant coach with the Washington Capitals, you could say. He was recently named head coach of Dartmouth hockey, so even more ties with him in the USHL because now he's coaching in college. You know he's going to be recruiting his former league, but he played for Waterloo way back in the day with Joe Pavelski, and it was a great interview. I mean, he has a lot of great stories, especially, he's coaching Alex Ovechkin, so you're always going to have some good stuff there. But a great hockey player back in the day, even better coach. And so we didn't get a chance to talk to him about Dartmouth because this happened after our interview at the end of last week, but still nonetheless, it's going to be a good one from a guy with high prestige coming out of the USHL.
Well, certainly timely. It's almost as if Brent Meskey had his cards tight to his chest and knew that this was coming and that he was going to be the next head coach of Dartmouth. So you guys actually got that interview done. I couldn't be a part of it last week, right in time to launch this week. But yeah, and for me, I was bummed to not be able to be a part of it. A good old Renwing Minnesotan. So we share the same home state. I would have loved to have talked about being a Red Wing winger. But nonetheless, I know you guys nailed it, and I know you guys were really happy with how the interview went, and I know our fans will think the same.
So that'll be later this week. Make sure to stay tuned to the USHL social media pages and our fancy new tab on the website to see the next and hear the next U Show podcast. So for Jared Boll and Ben Gisselson, I'm Chris Treft, and this was the U Show podcast.
This is the U Show podcast.